Hey everyone, welcome to our 5-year anniversary episode celebrating our podcast Is Fitz Happy? Thank you for sending in all of your questions to us. If we haven't gotten to your question by the end of this episode, where it's over 2 hours long already, we will be answering all of the questions. It will just be in the next episode, the regularly scheduled chapter episode. So don't worry, we will get to you. And without further ado, let's get to the inheritance. Welcome back to Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And this week we're discussing a short story by Robin Hobb, The Inheritance. It's a bonus episode for us. It's our 5-year anniversary special.
Happy birthday, everyone.
Happy birthday. We're turning 5 years old today. Normally, this podcast goes through the realm of the Elderlings chapter by chapter in a spoilery reread kind of fashion. So if you're tuning in just for this special episode, just be aware that we are doing a spoiler podcast here. We might be discussing other events in the story. And if you would listen to our other episodes, there will be spoilers for sure in those.
Yes.
But this is our first time through this short story, The Inheritance.
Yeah. This is from the Robin Hobb short story book. She released a book full of short stories that are set in the realm of the Elderling world.
Partially,
Mostly,
yeah.
some of
So
them.
it's a split collection between her other pseudonym as well, Megan Lindholm and Robin Hobb. So they both have short stories in the collection. And I believe Homecoming is another short story, which is about kind of the founding of Treyhog and stuff. And I think Cat's Meat is another Six Duchies short story, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not sure where the Piebald and the Prince fits in, if it's in this book or not. But those are the ones from Robin Hobb. And then there's other short stories, obviously unrelated, by Megan Lindholm, her other pen name.
Yes. So just a fun little story. We're not talking about every story, though. We're just talking about this one.
Yes.
And it's kind of a really exciting one. We thought it was pretty fitting. It's about a trader girl, I guess, in a way.
Kind of. At least descended from an old trader family.
Yeah.
Talks about Bingtown slightly.
And there's Wizardwood. So
And honestly, it's shorter than most chapters that we've been reading lately.
true. And there's only one point of view. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's written in first person, which was interesting to read again. That wasn't Fitz.
yeah.
Because that might have been the first time in a long time that I've read a Robin Hobb chapter that wasn't Fitz, that was first person.
Yes, true.
At the beginning of each of these short stories, there's a small little personal note about kind of the inspiration or at least an idea behind the short stories. And Robin Hobb is writing about how she got an inheritance from some of her family members. And it's, kind of paltry if you look at it in terms of material wealth. But she makes a note that an inheritance isn't about the material wealth, but about the experiences that come with it.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting to get to read about Robin Hobb's background, I guess.
Yeah.
I assume it's her real life history, not just a made up thing for the blurb, because it does talk about World War II, was it?
Yeah. My parents both lived through the Great Depression and World War II. My father met my mother when he was stationed near Norwich in the 8th Air Force.
Right. So definitely not set in Realm of the Elderling world.
No, at the beginning of the collection, she does say that it's anecdotes from her life.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just found that really interesting because it really did put me in the mind of reading the Fitz books, because Fitz also puts little anecdotes and epigraphs in his each chapter. And so I thought that was kind of cute that I don't think that's why she did it, but I thought it was funny that one of her characters so resembled her. But I also found it really interesting that this idea that material wealth isn't as important as the meaning behind like your memories with family and loved ones.
Right.
And just sort of that idea and thinking on that and how that's something that she sort of was raised in, how that can interpret how she writes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking that I feel like there are other, besides the character we're about to read, there are other characters that she has that kind of fit into that and have that ideal, especially when you think about like the Vestrits, which is the most recent
example, I guess.
Yes, example. Yeah. We have the Vestrits who really don't seem to place much value. Well, at least Ronica, I should say, doesn't seem to place much value on the things themselves. They're willing to get rid of everything to save the family. And
to be fair, they're kind of forced into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does mirror kind of.
Yeah, but it does feel like Ronica's okay because it's just stuff. Like that's kind of the vibe I got when I was reading it beforehand anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see that it seems as though maybe that's how Robin Hobb views things, or at least that's how her family was raised to be. And maybe that's reflected in her works. But then also I was thinking kind of Fitz as well is like that a little bit. He's not really fussed about material wealth. So
right.
He's more, I mean, to be fair, he's pretty depressed and
forged a little bit now.
Yeah. But I was just thinking about how he kind of doesn't have a lot. He just writes down his memories. Like that's something that's important to him, not so much things. So yeah, I don't know. I just found that really interesting to see that reflected, the real life reflected in the work.
Yeah. So the inheritance, as we mentioned before, we're kind of talking about, the world of the Liveship Traders in Bingtown a little bit. This takes place in one of the small villages outside of Bingtown for part of it. And that's where we start.
Yeah. It's a 2-day walk away.
Yep.
But we don't know when this is and like what time period where this fits into Fitz universe.
I think it's a little bit before Liveship Traders.
Why do you say that?
Because of things I've seen online. And also there isn't mention of like tattooed or anything like that. So it's not after Liveship Traders.
Sure. I guess there's also no mention of dragons.
Right.
So it can't be after either, or serpents really, but this doesn't take place on the water.
Yeah. Well, we start with a young woman named Cerise. And we find out that her grandmother has just died, who she has been taking care of for the past couple years.
Right.
Staying in her house.
Yeah. And she is in her grandmother's room going through her jewelry box.
Pretty much the only thing that she owned, the grandmother owned, really.
Yeah.
There's 2 nice necklaces in there, a silver ring that has no gemstone in its setting, and a wooden pendant with a silver chain.
Right. And she notes that the pendant is carved in a really ugly silvery gray wood. But the face...
It's a lovely carving.
Yeah, it's a lovely carving. It looks really well done. And the face itself is clearly mirroring some aspects of her own. So it is obviously an ancestor of some sort.
Right. So she's looking at all these things and tucks that pendant and puts that pendant on and tucks it away before her cousin comes in. And these cousins are very, this cousin particularly is very rude, and she's the eldest cousin and the eldest of the grandchildren, apparently.
Yes.
And claims the 2 nice necklaces for herself and her sister and says, here, you can have this ring. It's basically what you deserve.
Right. Because it's missing a stone, clearly, and just not really worth much. And this is really frustrating for Cerise, our main character, because, first of all, super rude.
Right, yeah.
But second of all, there's just this like underlying tension because we find out that Cerise, though she was taking care of her grandmother, according to the living family members, didn't really deserve the house that she lived in. It was the father of Cerise's cousin. Tetlia's father, who is the rightful owner of the land. And he so graciously allowed her grandmother to live on the land until she passed before getting it back for himself. And even though she took care of her grandmother, they told her ahead of time that she would get nothing out of doing that because she isn't part of the family, quote unquote.
Yeah, because Abrisha, the grandmother who just passed away, was the second wife of the grandfather of Tetlia.
Yes. So his first wife's son is the person who gets all the inheritance. And so therefore his daughters also are entitled to it. Whereas Cerise is the second child. Her mother, I believe, was the daughter of the grandparents.
Either way. Yeah.
And she doesn't get anything. But her parents also are dead, I think. They're mentioned a few times, but they aren't around and they're not taking care of her. So I assume
they only appear in the first couple pages of this short story and then don't exist later. So.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to assume that they've passed as well.
Yeah. Tetlia says, "For you, Cerise," tossing her the robbed ring, "not much of an inheritance, but she did feed and clothe you for the last 2 years and kept you in a house that long ago should have come to my father. That is more than she ever did for my sister and me." So Cerise, we see evidence here of her getting a little bit angry, but kind of pushing it away and not getting much from this family that has raised her or she has been around all of her life.
Right. And she also talks about how frustrating it is to be in this situation because her cousin is claiming her grandmother's family to take the jewelry.
Right.
But then in the same breath saying that Cerise isn't really family and neither is her grandmother. And so they don't deserve the land, or Cerise doesn't deserve any claim to inheritance of the grandfather, which is really frustrating because first of all, she loves her grandmother. And second of all, she is part of the family.
Right.
So it's just like a really weird take on everything. But it was really interesting because her cousin also says she burned through her family fortune when she was a girl, talking about grandmother.
Yeah. And then says, "Everyone knows that if my grandfather had not married her, she'd have starved in the streets. And my father has been good enough to let her live live out her life in this house." So yeah, that's kind of where we get the background.
Yeah, so that's kind of the feelings of the family members.
And Cerise doesn't talk back to Tetlia at all until Tetlia walks away, really, and just says, "I loved her," into the stillness. So she's feeling a little bit of rage and everything like that, but doesn't speak up for herself. And we learn that she has kind of been schooled all her life to let go of that rage and that anger because fighting back isn't worth it.
Right. Yeah, it's her grandmother and mother both were of the school of thought that it's not that serious, you know, like it's better not to rock the boat, just sort of keep your head down, everything will be fine. And scandal and strife serve no purpose.
Yeah, exactly. "I looked at the gaping ring in my hand and then slipped it onto my finger. It fit as if made for me. Somehow it seemed an appropriate inheritance." So she packs and has to leave because they have a conversation. There's a conversation depicted in the short story of Cerise and her
uncle.
Yeah, her uncle speaking, and Cerise being like, "I have nowhere else to go.
Please let me have one night."
Yeah, or a week or something. And the uncle's like, "Well, you've had 2 years to plan and you didn't do anything, so leave now. It's ours."
Yeah, so she is not wanted in the home.
Right.
But luckily, she does have a friend named Hedda, who is a sheep herder and lives on the land, rents out land from previously the grandmother, now the uncle.
Yeah, and they've kind of have a common enemy because the uncle is raising prices.
Yes, he's raising rent, and which is the first time rent has been raised, I think, since Hedda has lived there, it's said.
Lucky her.
Yeah, I know. So she's really frustrated, but they seem to have good rapport, and it seems like they've been friends for a while.
Yeah.
Even though there's a little bit of an age gap, I think.
There is, yeah. Hedda has, 2 kids or 1 kid, and she's pregnant with another.
Yeah. And is married, and Cerise seems to be young enough to where she's not married, but that doesn't seem to be an issue in the moment, and like in this moment.
Yeah. Honestly, I would kind of guess 18-ish.
Yeah.
Around.
That's how it feels.
So Cerise kind of heads over to that with her clothes that she packed up, the pendant, the Wizardwood pendant, the ring, and the Lantis old trader family robes that her grandmother owned.
Because her family was from the Lantis trader family.
Yes.
And those are saffron colored.
Cerise hesitated before she put it in the rucksack. I had never seen her wear it. Once I had asked her about that only unused garment in her chest. She had shaken her head. I don't know why I kept it. It has nothing to do with my life anymore. In Bingtown, trader families wear them when they go to the Traders' Council to vote on trader matters. Saffron was my family's color, the Lantis family, but I gave all that up years ago. So then we get our second background tip about Obrisha, the grandmother. She lost her family fortune and squandered it away, but also gave up the trader life.
Which is kind of crazy when we think about, Liveship Trader series, how it seems like at least old traders seem to have a lot of pride in being old traders.
Right.
So for somebody to walk away kind of feels like a crazy thing as somebody who's read the Realm of the Elderlings series.
Yeah. So now she is at Hedda's house, right? And she's kind of talking about her future there.
She also shows Hedda the necklace that she had, the Wizardwood necklace, although she doesn't know that's what it is, just this pendant. And Hedda is the one who recognizes it as Wizardwood. So here, when it's shown, she notes that it looks like it used to be painted. So there's a change in the description of the wood, which we know is probably a quickening happening.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So Hedda says, the chain will bring you some coin and maybe the empty ring, but that pendant is an evil thing. I'd get rid of it if I were you. Throw it in the sea. It's wizard wood, the stuff a Liveship is made from. I wouldn't wear it next to my skin for the world. Why is it evil? I demanded of Hedda. Liveships aren't evil. Their figureheads come to life and talk and guide the boat on its way. They're magic, but I've never heard them called evil. Hedda shook her head stubbornly. It's Rainwild magic, and all know no good ever came down the Rainwild River. A lot of folks say that's where the blood plague came from. Leave magic like that to those trader folk who are born to it. It's not for you and me. It's bound to bring you bad luck, Cerise, same as it brought your grandmother. Get rid of it. And then Cerise is like, well, she came from trader stock, so it probably came from that.
Yeah.
But that's the other hint that I forgot until now. I noted it on my first read through, but mention of the blood plague. That's why I think it's right before Liveship Traders.
Right.
Because there's no unrest in Bingtown, but also mention of
the blood plague.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Hedda is disapproving of the pendant, and Cerise is like, well, I'm going to keep it.
Right. And then Hedda's husband enters the group chat. Hedda's husband is a certified creep.
Yeah.
And he
has always put Cerise on edge.
Yes.
Made her uneasy. But she's never, spent the night over at Hedda's house or anything. But she's still very wary of the husband.
Exactly. And he's so excited that she's going to be staying the night. He even lets her know that if she'd like to stay on longer, there are plenty of wifely duties his wife no longer can do that she can do in exchange for free rent or free room and board.
Yeah. So, and then Cerise is like, well, thank you, but I'm going to go on to Bingtown. And then Hedda's like, Bingtown? That den of vice? Stay in the country, girl, where folks have hearts. No one will treat you well in the city. And then her husband's like, yeah, stay. Live here and I'll treat you just like one of my own.
Yeah, he's a real
doozy. But it's so funny, like the country attitude towards the city. It's very stereotypical, and it's definitely a trope, but it's
Yes.
fun to see in like a fantasy setting like this.
Yeah, where those city folk don't know anything, and
Exactly.
it's dangerous in the city because it's a city.
So at night, Hedda's husband makes a pass at Cerise as Cerise is supposedly sleeping, but she's pretending to sleep and just pretending to stay still. So it passes because she can't speak out, right? Like,
Right,
what would
she's-
everybody else say?
Yeah, she doesn't want to wake Hedda and risk Hedda misunderstanding the situation and kicking
Right.
her out, and also doesn't want to wake the children and make them uncomfortable, and it just is awful. He's like cuddling up to her, and
She says, I tried to be as stoic as my long enduring grandmother. Let him touch me. If I refused to wake, surely he would leave me alone.
but fortunately, she's not alone because she has the pendant, and like I mentioned earlier, the coloring was indeed its quickening because it then speaks for her, which
Yeah.
I don't think she quite is sure that that's what has happened.
I think she makes a guess based on like how she fears to take it off
Yes.
later on or fears to touch it.
Yes, but a voice comes out of the darkness and sort of berates Hedda's husband for being a scoundrel and a lout and just a bad person, and how
And
dare
threatens
he.
him.
Yeah, she's gonna tell his wife, and
I'll rake your face to leave marks so Hedda can't ignore it.
yes, yeah. So very, very nice to have somebody standing up for Cecia. I get
Cerise, yeah.
Cerise. Sorry, too many names.
Caesarea? You're talking about a serpent?
Yeah. So Cerise has somebody in her corner, which is nice, but she isn't the one who spoke, and it's a little bit creepy that she isn't the one who said it. But that Hedda's husband doesn't know that, and he's angry, saying that she should be grateful that they're giving her a place to stay, and leaves.
Yeah. Cerise once again says nothing, fearing that what he says about Bingtown is true because he warns her, like, men are going to take without even, like, giving what I was going to offer you
Right.
in Bingtown. So Cerise is just not feeling steady about her future at the moment, and she leaves the next morning where Hedda is like, please stay, almost in tears. Like, don't go
Yeah.
to that den of vice and sin, the big city.
Yes, the big bad.
Mm-hmm.
But she does go, and she talks a little bit about her parents here and how it's a 2-day walk to Bingtown, but the only other time she made it was with her parents when she was a little girl, and her dad had helped carry her, and her family made food for her. So she's never really done it on her own, and she's a little bit nervous. And as she goes on and the day gets longer, she stops for dinner, and she's sort of whiny because her feet hurt and she can't light a fire because she's too afraid that if she lights a fire, a thief will see her and rob her in the night, and she doesn't feel safe. And so she's chewing on some of the cheese and bread that Hedda packed for her, and is kind of moaning about how she's not really got the best of luck.
Yeah, she talks to herself here, saying, a fine beginning to my life. And then she has a reply from the pendant.
Yes.
No worse than what other women of your line have faced, whispered a voice. It came from my shirt front. In an instant I had snatched off chain and pendant and flung it from me. It caught on a bush and hung there, silver chain glinting in the last of the sunset. The dangling pendant came to rest facing me. Even in the fading light, I could see that it had taken on lifelike colors. It raised tiny eyebrows at me in disdain. It's a foolish choice you're making, girl, it warned me. Throw me away, and you throw away your inheritance, just as your grandmother did. Frightened as I was, the small voice was so like my grandmother's that I could not ignore it. What are you? I demanded. Oh, come. I am exactly what you see and know me to be. Let us not waste time in foolishness. And then she talks about the colors, and the pendant's like, well, I was away from people, trapped inside the jewelry box forever. So
Yeah.
you're young, and your anima rushes strong as your blood through your veins. So absorb some of her life force.
Yes. Also, interestingly, we get a little bit of look into Wizardwood and sort of how it works in some ways
Yeah.
through this, because we know that the wizard wood was previously animated and then
Went inert. I
went
guess.
into the gray, which we did see happen with Vivacia whenever she went inside of herself.
Yeah.
She also went gray and lifeless. But here we see that for this little tiny pendant, being on somebody's body in person
Yeah.
for 24 hours, 48 hours was enough to reawaken the pendant.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this was really interesting because later the pendant talks about how she has the memories of all the women before her that have worn her. And so they used to pass them down mother to daughter. And I just found that really interesting because I was thinking about Kenneth's pendant and how when he dies, nobody else really knows that they might assume it's wizard wood after a while.
Someone might know, but he does, I think, mandate that Etta wear it always and then pass it on to his son.
Yes. So that means that Etta will impart some things into the wizard wood, and then his son will also. And if he continues that line,
rest in peace, Paragon.
Yeah.
Paragon Ludluck.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting to find out that these objects, especially the smaller ones, also still take on all that information.
Right. Yeah.
And it seems to not only be what they're seeing with their own eyes, but there is that connection. There are those memories that are happening. And I just found that really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, I thought that was a cool little tidbit. And also that Paragon could have, quote unquote, died if he would have gone long enough without human interaction. There's a lot more of him.
Yeah.
And a lot more memories.
It would take a lot longer.
Yes. But it still is possible that at some point a live ship could go dormant with being left alone long enough.
Right.
That's kind of interesting thought as well.
Yeah. So they have this conversation and the pendant is like, don't throw me away. Your grandmother did. And Cerise is very interested in what her grandmother's past was like because the pendant brings up, like, I know all of your ancestors' lives, basically, because I am part of them. So she's like, tell me what went on.
Yeah, because her grandmother did not really give her a lot of information about her past. So the pendant does let her know what happened.
Yeah.
And
the pendant dangles the little thing like, hey, I can have you reclaim all of your inheritance and what went with it too. You know?
Yes. Yeah. So the story of the grandmother, Abrisha, thank you. Grandma Abricia's story is that she was part of the Atlantis trader family, and they weren't super wealthy by old trader means, but they weren't poor either.
Yeah.
And the grandparents' parents believed that their children should marry for love, not wealth. That wealth wasn't as important, but they still set aside money for each of their children so that no matter who they married, they would be able to survive and live comfortably.
Yeah, that's why they did that. So they could marry for love. They didn't have to rely on political or material wealth marriages.
Yes. So they didn't really put a lot of pressure on their children. And then grandmother decided, kind of went into life, lived on her own and lived well for a time until a new young man comes to town. Her
parents have passed away at this point.
Yes.
Abricia's parents.
Yes, Abricia's parents have passed. She's living on her own. She's doing well for herself. And then a man comes to town. He is from somewhere else. I don't think it ever says where.
No, just a new to Bingtown, a lovely young man.
Yes. And his name is Howarth.
Yeah.
And he sort of Nigerian princes his way into the heart of Abrita.
So he is basically a con man, but he didn't set out to be a con man, it doesn't seem like. He Abrisha falls in love with him, and he keeps mentioning like, hey, I'm going to make a fortune, because that's what he came to Bingtown to do. I need to make money. I'm a younger son. I don't have inheritance of my own. I'm going to make my own fortune, and then we can get married, because Abrisha just wants to marry him.
Right.
It's like, I can't marry you without bringing my own money to it. I don't want to be seen as a pauper or not a proper man, that sort of thing.
Right.
So
but the whole reason he doesn't have money is because the guy he works for, who is a trader, doesn't have enough business sense.
he runs a shop, so it's not necessarily like an old trader kind of thing.
Right. No, just lowercase t trader.
Yes.
But he doesn't have enough sense of the world, and he doesn't make good decisions, and he's not brave.
Imagination.
Yeah. So if it was his own store, he would make so much more money. He'd be doing so much better. But he doesn't have enough money to make his own store. And so after talking about this and how he has all these grand ideas, finally Abrita says, what if I gave you some of my inheritance so that you could go start this business? Because he's not marrying her until he has his own business at this point. And she came to this decision on her own. He didn't ask for it, but the pendant says that she strongly advised against doing it.
Yeah. The pendant the whole way is just like, I told her not to.
Right. Because
I'm the smartest.
It's fishy. It feels like a scam. And I agree. And you said you don't think he set out to scam her. I think he did. Why else would he? I'm not going to marry you until I have money. But wouldn't it be nice if I had my own business to make that money? It feels very intentional.
I'm just saying there's probably faster cons, and the way that this is set up, it was like over 5 or 6 years where he got her money.
Yeah, well, not the first time though, because they weren't together for 5 or 6 years when she finally offered. Well, this is like a few months in. It feels. I guess there is no timeline set out.
Right.
So anyway, she gives him a big portion of her inheritance to set out to Jamalia to get the contacts and
buy the trade goods.
Yes,
that would make him his fortune.
Exactly. So he's gone, and I don't know how long.
They make a deal that half of whatever profits he got would be his, and then they could be married.
Yes.
So because she is funding it, basically.
Yes.
So he agrees quickly, and months passed, and Abrisha pined, but I was relieved, the pendant, knowing that even though her money was gone, he was gone with it. She still had enough left to get on with, and now perhaps she was wiser. But just when she had begun to put memories of him aside, he returned. He wore fine clothes and brought gifts with him, perfumes and silk, but little else. Most of the coin, he told her, had been spent to court trading partners in that distant city. All was in readiness now, and as soon as he had worked hard and saved a bit of money, he could go south and make their fortune.
Right.
So it was a few months, many months. I'm guessing, 6 months to a year almost.
Right.
And then he returns and says, like, everything's in readiness.
It's almost ready. I just need a little more time. I can't marry you yet.
I need money to make money. So
which
I'll save up again.
Cerise, also hearing the I need money to make money quip, is saddened because she recognizes it as something that her grandmother would lament about, that she'd never have more money because you need money to make money.
Right.
And so clearly this story is not only true, but something that had lasting impact on her grandmother.
Mm-hmm. So Cerise is also like, oh, she believed this guy. And the pendant's like, yeah.
Yeah, annoyingly so. Because then she once again offers money and
the pendant says she persuaded him to take her money.
Right.
And then he sets out immediately again. And Abrisha kept back only the tidy little house she lived in, some family jewels, and enough to support herself until he returned. When over a year passed with no word from him, she admitted to me that she had been a fool, and she admitted it to her friends as well.
And so now the friends know, and they feel really bad for her. They help her.
They aid her with money and introductions to suitable young men. But
she has decided love is not worth it. It doesn't mean anything. Who cares about love? I'm going to marry somebody just to marry somebody.
It seems like she made a reasonable choice here, because the pendant kind of is on her side or paints her in a good light, saying that Brisha swore her love would not be easily won again. So maybe the second time was the charm at this case, right? She learned her lesson. This guy ran off with her money.
Yes.
That's what is the assumption,
right?
At least.
So she is sort of picking up the pieces of her life once again when he returns again a third time.
Yeah. Cerise, before that happens, Cerise asks like, oh, is this when my grandfather came into the picture? And the pendant is very disparaging about the grandfather and says, no, he doesn't come into this tale, but your grandmother only married him because she needed a place to stay. And your grandfather only married your grandmother because he wanted someone to take care of his son, his crying son, and keep the house clean.
Yeah, and also his last wife had died from the ill treatment that he had given her. Mm-hmm. So not a great guy.
Right. Yeah.
But he doesn't matter at this point. We're still on Howarth's tale.
Yes. And as you were just about to say, third time, or I guess the second time he comes home.
Yes.
And everything has gone awry. Nothing has gone right, you know. And it was sure that Abrisha would drive him away, but she welcomes him in. Oh, her long lost love.
She's so excited to see him and hear what has happened.
Yeah, he had been too ashamed to come back home and tell her what went wrong and all this. That's why he stayed away so long. He's begging for her forgiveness. And the little face gave a disdainful snort, and she believed him. So he's coming back penniless, saying like, nothing happened as I thought it would.
Yes, it was just all bad luck, and he was so ashamed.
Finally, my heart could not be parted from you any longer.
But, then, of course, Abrita says, well, just marry me then. It's okay. You can be penniless. It's fine. We'll be able to live and make an honest living.
We'll work hard, but we'll live together.
Yes, it's fine. I forgive you. Let's work together. But he's still not quite sure he should marry her yet, because then he wouldn't have anything to give her.
Yeah, the pendant says like Abrisha should have listened to me, to her friends, to anyone, but she wouldn't listen to anyone but him. And he, speaking so nobly, said he would not let her family think her a fool. Howarth would not marry her while he was penniless. A fortune was still within his grasp. And it kind of skims over how he convinced her, but slowly over time, just like, oh, a little money here for a bribe, a little money here. Eventually, she had sold everything to help fund this final trip for him.
Right. So she is once again taken for a ride.
Yeah. And Cerise is feeling like during this story, incredibly saddened because she believed, Abrisha believed up until her death that you had to spend money to make money. So there was no way for her to get out of this hole that she had.
Yes. Well, it's just really sad because, she's being taken advantage of, and she continuously believes this guy because she loves him, and nothing anyone else says is getting through to her.
Yeah.
It's just what he says, and she's so sure. And so he leaves again, and she realizes her mistake.
Well, she asks to go with him, right? And Howarth is like, oh no, the cost is too much. Like that'd be an extra fare. The trip is too hard. All of that. So she's like, okay, I'll stay then.
Yeah.
And then it's years and she doesn't hear from him.
Yeah.
And he promised that no matter what would happen, he would come back within a year.
Right.
And there's nothing.
And then how many years later and she sees him in the marketplace?
Well, she goes to her friend to confess the situation of what happened again. And so she stays with her friends during that time because she doesn't have a house anymore. She doesn't have wealth.
Yes.
And then it's, I don't know, a few years, 3 years later, he came back to Bingtown, but it was months before your grandmother knew of it. So she has to wait like 3.5 years before she sees him again. And she sees him in a market with his Jamalian wife and a kid.
And not only that, but the Jamalian wife is wearing her family's emerald around her neck.
Yes.
Because the ring that Cecia has...
Cerise.
I don't know why I keep doing that. The ring that Cerise has that is missing a stone once held a giant emerald on it.
Yeah.
And it was pried off of her out of the setting by
sold.
Howarth.
Yeah.
As a last resort.
Mm-hmm.
And he had it turned into a necklace for his new wife. And so she wore the family jewels on her neck with her little son in a pram behind her as they walked. And Abrita doesn't say anything to him.
Yeah, the pendant just says that she stood and stared.
Yeah. And then she flees Bingtown, basically.
Yeah, a cry of pierced disbelief broke out of her. At the sound, he turned. Howarth recognized her, and yet he turned aside from her. She shrieked his name, demanding to know why he had abandoned her. And basically, Howarth to his wife is like, oh, she's crazy. Let's keep moving.
Yes.
So Brisha goes back to the friend's house and wants to, has discussions with her friends about it and the pendant, saying, like, oh, you have to claim your inheritance back. Like, you have to get your money, denounce him. All
he made a deal to give you half of the wealth that he made. So.
Yeah. And Cerise is even like, well, did she do all that? And the pendant is like, no.
Yeah. She was strong in front of her friends and put up a good face. But every time she went to write the letters, she just fell into despair because she still loved him and wanted him back. The letters started as these demands for justice and ended as pleas to get back together.
Yeah. And the worst came to worst, and she, as basically a beggar in the night, as the pendant describes, went to his house and begged entry to a servant and then was turned away. And then that's when she flees Bingtown.
Yes. So she flees Bingtown and decides to marry the grandfather.
Basically. Yeah, she doesn't even tell her friends goodbye, packs up a few things and heads out.
And she just feels so much shame for everything that's happened and left.
Yeah, and then Cerise, the story has ended, and Cerise has to reflect on what she believed of her grandmother and what she thought of her grandmother's strength, because she thought her grandmother's stoicism and just implacability in the face of her kind of cruel grandfather was strength.
Right.
And she's kind of retooling what she learned from her grandmother and her mother and saying oh no, I was just taught to stand by when bad things happened and not fight back.
Or act on them. Yeah.
Exactly.
And we also learned that whenever Abrita fled, the pendant was really frustrated with her and disagreed with her and called her out and was begging her to make better choices. And because of that, Abrita decided to stop wearing the pendant and put her away into the jewelry box until she was found.
Mm-hmm. She muffled my voice and shut me away. I thought of all the years the pendant had waited in the box. Why did you tell me this? I asked the pendant in a low voice. For the first time, a question seemed to give her pause. She lifted her brows as if amazed I did not know. Because she lives on in me, as do all the women of your line who have warned me, and I would see things set right. I would see you regain what is rightfully yours. And Cerise is like, but how? Whatever. And the pendant's like, no, I'll do all the work.
Yeah,
just listen to me.
Yes. And the pendant does do all the work, I mean, whenever Cerise gets to Bingtown, the pendant tells her which house to try to get a job at as sort of a serving girl. Mm-hmm. And it's an older woman, old trader woman.
A trader Redoff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she sort of helps out with day-to-day things and is just a serving girl.
Basically tends her like she did with her grandmother.
Yeah. It really comes in handy that she had 2 years of experience prior.
Yeah, exactly. And so she's very patient. She learns the town. She learns some gossip. The pendant teaches her how to carry herself in public, how to style her hair, and she saves up money and eventually buys some jewelry and some accoutrements for looking nice at the pendant's, suggestions.
Yes.
And eventually hears a rumor while serving Trader Redoff of Howarth. She never asked about Howarth, never went looking for him, just waited for the rumors to come.
Right. under the direction of the pendant.
Yes, again, yeah. So Cerise is sitting here very patient, basically completely directed by this wizardwood magic pendant.
Yes.
Filled with her, the women of her family, and plotting revenge, and has that feeling of revenge growing within her. And it's kind of surprising her how much she wants vengeance for all that happened.
Yeah, my yearning for vengeance surprised me, which I thought was really interesting. And I wondered if partially it's due to the sharing of the bond with her pendant.
I think so. I think there's definitely an outrage there of having lived through those experiences too, that
Right.
the pendant is kind of
Feeding
sharing.
into her.
Yeah. But Cerise specifically, right after that quote, says, "My grandmother and my mother had both schooled me in self-effacing resignation. I had thought it the lot of all women." Yeah, that family that she married into does not seem great.
No. And really interestingly, I think we have this juxtaposition of the pendant telling her that, you know, she shouldn't be like her grandmother in some ways, that it's not good to just sort of sit by and let things happen. You should take what you need and what you
Right.
deserve and, you know, all of that. But interestingly, I think the pendant is making her sort of
Is doing everything.
complacent in life because she's doing, telling her what to do and she's just doing it.
True. Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. I guess for a good cause.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a short story, I guess.
Yes.
Kind of take things as they come.
Exactly. And like you said, Howarth's name is mentioned. It's mentioned not favorably with the traders who are talking about him.
Talking about a Jamalian family that had moved to Bingtown and was putting on airs. A page from Howarth's book, someone said with a sniff.
So now that Cerise knows that Howarth is there and somewhere nearby, she is impatient to know when she can finally meet him and take this revenge.
Months have passed by this time.
Yeah. And the pendant, it says, I need some time to think about it, you know, and then decides that during a market day.
Yeah.
It's
a Bingtown celebration day.
Yes.
Where everyone's kind of out and about.
Yeah, that's going to be the day. And on that day, she has the morning free. She gets one day of free a year.
She says, my mistress granted me a half day to myself twice every 40 days. So she gets one day off every 40 days, basically.
Which is awful. She needs to get with the union and get some representation.
But had to convince this trader to take this day off because it's a public celebration, you know, everyone's going to be out. So so she promised that she would be back by nightfall.
Yeah, she's going to be back early and whatever. And interestingly, the pendant is really specific on how she should be doing her hair, what jewelry to wear, and how to dress.
Yep.
And whenever she goes past the trader woman she works for to leave for the day, the woman says, "You remind me of someone." And so I thought in that moment, it feels like this woman that she's serving is probably one of
the friends
that helped Abrita.
The old trader woman sat up in her bed regarding me closely. As if I were her daughter, she commanded me to turn before her and then to turn my face to the light. "Paint your lips with my carmine," she instructed me suddenly, "and touch your eyes with black." When I had done so, she inspected me critically. "You'll do," she observed. "There's Bingtown in your blood, my little country wren," she added with satisfaction. "So I've been telling those old biddies I call my friends. Off you go, to whomever you've chosen to captivate. He won't stand a chance before those eyes." So then she goes back to her room and dons the trader robe.
Yes.
And heads out.
And
before we move on, there's a line in here about the celebration. It's the anniversary of when the Bingtown Traders arrived in Bingtown.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Arrival day, which it's funny because I don't think we really hear about that celebration from the Vestrits, but
yeah, it's an added extra little thing here.
A little holiday.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so she goes out and in the trader's robes, people are giving her friendly looks. There are some trader boys and young men, not boys, giving her nods of approval. And she is standing square under their gaze. She has confidence now.
Yeah, she's been here for a few months. She knows how to hold herself and purport herself in public, and she's not scared of the bustling market because she's been here for months, like we've said. So she's holding that confidence. Occasionally, an older trader would regard me with a puzzled stare. I knew it had been years since anyone had worn the saffron trader robes of the Lantis family. I smiled at their puzzlement and strode on. The festive crowds grew denser, yet it seemed they parted from me. The music drew me, as did the savory aromas that floated on the morning air. So she makes her way to the great circle of the market, and the center had been cleared. Music was playing, sailors were there, there's tents set up with traders, and they're kind of like the forefront, but there's also non-trader tents that are set up.
Yes, and that's capital T traders.
Yes.
So we get to learn that the main tents, which are the capital T trader tents, are the colors of their family. So
Yes.
like her robe, if her family had wanted to be saffron, but every family has their own robes, or their robe color as their tent color. And then off to the side or to a different part of the market are the other trader, lowercase t traders.
The merchants of lesser bloodlines, as Cerise puts it.
Yes, and they either have all rainbow colors with all of the traders represented, or the specific traders that they work with the most represented. But they have multiple colors, not just the one.
Yeah, they're trying to compete to catch the eye.
Exactly.
And the pendant, as Cerise is walking around, is pointing out who the families are and what those colors are, and directs her, like says, wait, stop here. And then they stop. And basically both of them at once turn to this one tent, and they're like, it's that one.
Yeah. And they find Howarth.
Yep.
He's sitting at a table? Is that what it is?
Yeah. The family was arrayed within as if for a portrait. Parents and grown children sat about a table heavy with a rich morning repast. 2 young men in the robes of Bingtown Traders were guests there. From a separate, higher table, on tall chairs almost like thrones, an elderly couple looked down benevolently on their family. The matriarch was a small, plump woman. Her thinning white hair was carefully coiffed, and rings adorned her pale little hands. The emerald at her throat seemed to burn with a green fire. Beside her sat a handsome old man, as elegantly dressed and groomed. As I looked at him, I felt the pendant share my glance. From it, I felt a sudden wave of hatred greater than any I had ever known. Mingled with it was fury and outrage that he and the wife he had bought with Abricia's money had both outlived her in luxury and grace. Hardship and privation, I now saw, had cut short my grandmother's life. Not just wealth and respect, but life itself he had stolen from her. So they had aged quite well with the money that she had stolen, or he had stolen. But there's a small little mention in that sentence there. As I looked at him, I felt the pendant share my glance.
Yes.
And from it, I felt a sudden wave of hatred. So the pendant and Cerise have bonded quite closely.
Yes.
And the pendant is really taken over here.
Yeah. I found this really interesting because it feels closer to how the live ship connections work and what we've seen with live ship connections, how there is, that like sharing of feelings, they can share seeing each other's point of view, and that how that affects each other. But I found it interesting how different it feels from whenever we read about Kennett and his charm, because I don't think we've ever had Kennett describe what, like, feeling the same thing his charm was feeling, or see his charm seeing out of his eyes, or him seeing out of his charm's eyes. It just,
I don't think he ever wanted to seek a connection, or maybe he couldn't seek a connection because he was already bonded to Paragon.
True.
I don't know.
I mean, the other aspect too is that this was first generation Wizardwood and not multi-generational. Whereas, Paragon and the live ships have the more generations. And so does this pendant as well, has all those generations in it.
More of that family connection there.
Yeah. So that could also be part of it.
So that hatred springs up, and Cerise, with, I'm guessing, this is my interpretation, with the pendants putting words in her mouth, is confronting Howarth.
Yes.
But for your betrayal, Howarth, Lucretia Lantis would still be alive. And shouts it. All about me the festivities faltered. Conversation in the adjoining pavilion ceased. All eyes turned toward the scene I had abruptly created. My heart near stopped in my chest, but I found myself going on without it, stepping forward without conscious volition, shouting words whose source was not myself. So there's a great speech here, basically just saying like, were it not for you, Howarth, Habrisha would still be alive. You stole basically what in her head, what she had gone over. You had stole her wealth, but also her life and forced her into privation.
Yes.
It's all your faults. You know, she was my grandmother. I give to you now the last bit of wealth that you are unable to strip from her. This ring as empty as your promise. Keep it along with all else you swindled from her. Cerise pulls the silver ring from her finger and throws it, and it lands in the cup in front of the wife.
Yes.
Oh no, in Howarth's empty glass, sorry. Setting it ringing in the silence that followed my words. The old man's eyes stood out from his face, and a vein pulsed wildly on his brow. I suspected he felt he saw a ghost, come back to wake an old scandal just when his reputation most needed to be sound. And then she looks aside from him to his wife and says, "Study it well, wife. Wouldn't that emerald at your necklace fit perfectly in there? Because it's a Lantis emerald that he bought you for, you know?
Yeah.
He bought you with this wealth that was my family's."
Yeah, it is my family's wealth. And not only does she address the wife, but she also addresses the traders sitting by the grandchildren.
Yeah, the traders' sons. Yeah.
Yes. Saying, look at this well, traders' sons. You are marrying into their wealth, but it is the Lantis' wealth stripped of its name.
Yeah. Like consider who you would adjoin your family name to, basically.
Right.
And
Which is,
says like your whole family was founded on Howarth's betrayal of a Bingtown trader.
Right. And that's pretty big because if we know anything about the Bingtown Traders, it's that they stick to their own.
And this is before Liveship Traders.
Yeah.
This is big news that, just a regular merchant would be marrying into, both of the grandchildren would be marrying into trader families.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, obviously it is done, but it's not as common.
Yeah, exactly. Howarth finally finds his tongue after all of these accusations, and his denial basically admits it because he's so angry and he looks like he's just seen a ghost, because the pendant has been dressing up Cerise to look like Abrisha during this time. So he points a shaking finger at Cerise, but spoke to his wife in the pitched voice of the near deaf. "She can prove nothing. Nothing. The money Abrisha gave me, she gave me for love of me. She cannot legally force me to return it." His wife's jaw dropped. I thought she would faint from mortification. I let the silence gather, then floated my words upon it. "And with those words you admit a guilt and a shame greater than anything I could wish to prove. Keep the wealth, Howarth. Choke on it. You have dirtied it, and I have no need of anything you have touched." So there's a stunned silence, because obviously there's a silence at her yelling and her speech, and then he is deaf, so he talks louder than he should.
Well, I don't think he's deaf.
Deaf.
I don't think he is near deaf. I think he's so upset that he's shouting loud enough that anybody near deaf could hear him.
Oh, okay.
That's how I read it. It's not, or his tone is near deafening. It's not he's not deaf.
It says he spoke to his wife in the pitched voice of the near deaf. So it's to me that I thought that described that he was near deaf, and that's the voice he spoke in. But I guess either way, it works out that he spoke loud enough so everyone heard.
Yes. Doesn't he also say something about there being no proof?
Yeah. She can prove nothing. The money Abrisha gave me, she gave for love of me. Yeah. She cannot legally force me to return it. So Cerise just drops the mic and walks away into the stunned silence.
Right.
The scandal that Howarth thought he had left behind him would now mark his declining years. And the pendant answers her thought, saying, "Nor will his granddaughters wed traders' sons. his wife would do best to sweep them back to Jamalia and marry them off where she can, for after this they will never mount into Bingtown society.
Yeah, so she really ruined the
Pendant has savage joy in its thoughts right now.
Yes, but I don't know. I feel a little bit bad for the granddaughters because they don't know anything. They were not part of that. But
this is dragon revenge here. You know,
yes, it is.
This is scorned woman revenge out of like the storybooks. This is kind of let's melt everything around this man.
Yes. I also find it really interesting that the pendant is capable of sort of possessing Cerise.
Yeah.
She's able to move Cerise forward and speak through her.
I was kind of thinking about this, and I think it harkens back to, at least my headcanon for it, harkens back to when we were talking about Fitz first meeting Night Eyes, how that he was angry walking through Buckkeep Town, and Night Eyes is obviously angry at everything around them, and they connect through that, and it just rebounds off each other and builds. So I think that the pendant building that need for revenge in Cerise and telling the story and how to do this really just kind of rebounds those feelings back and forth and makes them more connected. So Cerise wanted to do those things.
Right.
And the pendant just found that an easy way to do it that way.
Sure.
That's kind of my headcanon. It's not like I don't know, a full possession and she wasn't in control of herself.
Right.
She kind of wanted to do those things too.
Sure.
I don't know.
It's just a little bit crazy because I don't think we get to see anybody else do anything like that with their wizard wood companions.
Yeah, true. And then as Cerise has time to cool down, she's like, but what did I accomplish though? Like,
now she doesn't even have the ring with the setting for the stone. She got nothing, she feels.
I thought I was doing all this to regain my inheritance. I thought I would force him to give up the wealth he had stolen from my grandmother. Instead, I walked away with nothing. Not even an empty ring remains to me. Only you. And the pendant's like, yeah, only you and your name. Taken back out of the dust and raised to prize once more. You basically stood up in front of all the traders and claimed that you were a traitor and that he was nothing and stole everything from you, but that you have your pride.
And that you wouldn't take it for nothing.
And you have your vote back because everyone witnessed the resurrection of the Lantis family, basically.
Right.
So that's kind of the thing, that you can wield your rightful vote.
Yeah, so that's also the inheritance. So family name, that's the inheritance.
Yeah. And that's where it ends. That's our short story.
Yeah. Thoughts?
It's a short story, so I can't expect the same depth out of everything, but it feels very easy for a Robin Hobb story, you know?
Sure.
Maybe it's because it's like a mostly happy ending.
Okay, sure. I mean, she still is poor and is going to have to work really hard to save up.
But that's what she's been doing already, you know? Yeah. That's what she's used to. So I guess she doesn't get to be fabulously wealthy at the end, but it's still like a relatively happy ending for minimal suffering.
Fair.
And it also seems like the pendant kind of Jaegering all of her moves.
True.
I like it in general. It gives a little bit of, just a small bit more of world building and like expansion of Bingtown. I like the addition of the holiday and kind of some of the other families that we don't get to see or talk about.
Right, yeah.
It was fine. It wasn't like my favorite thing, but it was good.
I liked it. I thought it was nice.
Yeah.
I'm sad that it's a short story because I wanted to keep reading to see how she now builds her fortune and you know what happens next. Where does she go from here? What happens to her during the Liveship Traders? And you know, I definitely found myself wanting more, but it is a short story, so it's just kind of a one-off. We don't really get to know more.
Right.
And it kind of makes me sad. But I don't know, I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I started kind of meh about it, which, you know, this is not against Robin Hobb at all. This is a personal problem. But I start all of Robin Hobb's stories or like new trilogies meh, minus obviously the second and third Fitz trilogies because I already know Fitz and I know what to expect.
Knew the characters, yeah.
Yeah, whenever I get a new character, and it happens most of the time when I read, to be honest, I will, sort of feel meh about a story until I get to know people more. And once I'm invested in the character, I care. And then I want more. So.
But by the end of it,
I did want more by the end.
That's nice.
Which is good.
It happened within, a chapter,
yeah,
basically.
20 pages, however many pages it was.
Yeah. It was pretty fun. I liked it. I think, we are going to do the other short stories eventually. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
But it's probably going to be a while before we do the next one. Try to fit them in where they're relevant.
Yes.
So the next one might be, I don't know, the Piebald Prince, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
It's about the old blood and stuff. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out.
Yes.
But thanks for tuning in to this section of it. It was fun to read the short story here and talk about it. And we're gonna do some questions now.
Yeah.
It'll be the next section. So stick around for them. All right. Now it's time for the listener questions.
Yeah, the favorite part.
Yeah, exactly. And this is specifically requested for our 5-year anniversary special bonus episode.
We never get to do fun, random questions. Yeah. Well, not never, but...
We'll still answer them probably if you ask them normal times, but we never really asked for them before.
Yeah. It's always fun getting to do something different, so... Before
we do that, I do want to kind of share some stats with you guys and kind of update you where our podcast is at for the past 5 years. And it's been crazy. We are going on strong. This is going to be, I think, episode 239, I think, if I'm in my head mapping this correctly, but where we're recording this right now. But we have 100,000.
Try again.
No, I won't. 205,000 downloads on Podbean, total downloads. So it's kind of crazy over the course of 5 years. A lot of people have tuned in and been following along with us. Of course, our first episode is our most listened to.
Obviously.
I think the first 5 are the most listened to. It just kind of goes down from there. There's random spikes here and there of random episodes that I have no idea why. But
sometimes people have a favorite chapter.
Yeah, I guess so. It's been really fun. This past year was our most listened to year of all time. It kept going up and up. We had a total of about 60,000 downloads in 2024, which is crazy. Downloads, like if you haven't heard any of your podcasts talk about stats yet, they're basically make-believe. It's very hard to keep track of what people are listening to and things like that. So it's just kind of a arbitrary number. You don't really need to know what it is. It's just cool to see the numbers go up.
Yeah.
How everyone is tuning in and participating in the community, which is really fun. We have 119 followers on Podbean. Spotify, we have 1,000 followers.
That is insane to me.
Yeah.
I mean, 100 people is a lot of people, but 1,000 people is crazy. I don't know.
And on Apple Podcasts, it's 328. So, yeah.
That's so many people. So thank you all for listening and joining along with the fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a ton of fun. There's a bunch of statistics that we to look at, and whether they're super accurate or not is always fun to kind of play around with and think about. But it's been a joy seeing those numbers go up, seeing the amount of people interacting with us go up over the years. And it's, I don't know. I really, really enjoy doing this still.
Yeah.
But without further ado, we do have some questions.
Yeah. So hopefully you like the stats. I'm sure there are people out there that
forgot as well. On YouTube, we have 136 subscribers.
Woo.
So we do post to a lot of different locations, depending on where you want to listen to our podcast. So choice is yours.
True. I'm sure there are plenty of listeners out there, since there are so many of you guys,
Yes.
who like statistics. So hopefully you enjoyed that.
But yeah, questions, the important part here.
Yes.
So we're gonna start. I'm just gonna start reading some off, and we can discuss a little bit. The first one comes in from JP, and they are wondering about the Pale Woman and our thoughts on the Pale Woman to start with, which is an interesting topic because we haven't quite gotten there, but we're so close to talking about the Pale Woman. They kind of talk about or ask about how the Pale Woman is like, so I don't know. She's so interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because how was she chosen?
Yeah.
We don't really go into it. Illustor is her name, I remember. And obviously we know about the Pale Woman. She was at Claris when Beloved was there, but she was being trained before Beloved arrived as the White Prophet of the place. So she was chosen by the servants, the 4 that were leading Claris.
Yes. Yeah, it's really interesting thinking about Illustor and her path, I guess.
Yeah, because she does affect changes. She makes things happen that are, according to our perspective and reading in the book, are bad, right?
Right.
But Fitz just happens to be the super catalyst and change things back.
Yeah, I don't know. What an interesting concept too, the 2 catalysts battling it out.
Yeah.
You just never know. I don't know.
I think she's a really good villain though.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to have a villain who is so evil but also has a lot of the traits and characteristics of somebody that we love, like Beloved.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So not only are they similar in looks, obviously, but they have the same ability. They have the same calling, presumably. And they also sort of both operate under weird ways where they're using people to get as an ends to a mean.
Yeah. Truly a foil for the Fool, and kind of a look into the Fool's background of what he could have been or become.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think whenever I think about Illustor, I think about how I just want to know when Illustor came to Claris.
That's what I was just wondering. Did she come to Claris, or was she
born
there?
Because I think that could explain sort of the cruelty that she seems to embrace. Although I don't know, that's hard to say because in the final series, I can't think of his name, but the little boy who drinks the serpent,
Vendelier.
Yes.
Vendelier. Yeah.
He doesn't seem evil. You know what I mean? Like there are people in that group that are whites who are not so cruel or evil.
But if you are born there and you are raised with the confidence that you are the White Prophet of the generation, with the full backing of the leaders there, maybe you have that arrogance kind of bred into you.
True. Well, also I think about how Fool has mentioned, or Beloved has mentioned multiple times, that translating the dreams,
interpreting them,
the interpretation is really hard. And not only is it hard, but there are a million ways to look at it.
Right.
And so if you're trained to read those prophecies in a certain way, and you think you're correct, that's the way you're doing it, that's the way you're trained to read it. Whereas Beloved, I think, especially because Beloved seems to actually be the one, doesn't fall for the tricks of learning the wrong way to interpret the dreams. I don't know. It's all very confusing. I think Illustor is a really interesting character. I wish we got to learn more about her.
Yeah.
But she does seem really mean. I mean, well, obviously, but like, I don't know, like the evil about her makes my skin crawl a little bit.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a really cool villain. JP's other question was, what is your favorite Night Eyes moment?
I think my favorite Night Eyes moment, this is really sad, but whenever Night Eyes dies.
That is a beautifully written passage.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going hunting. Are you coming, brother?
Yes. Like, it makes me cry just thinking about it. It makes me cry every time. I mean, it's so sad, obviously, but I think it is really my favorite moment with Night Eyes because I don't know. I think it just has so much emotion behind it. And also everybody's probably, well, not everybody. Most people have probably lost a pet and like have felt that emotion. And then there's like the deeper being able to talk with, I don't know. Everything about it I love.
There's a few for me, and mostly because they're all simple moments and they're not like a super strong scene or anything, but anything with Night Eyes and the ginger cakes, I love. I love anything where Night Eyes is lolling his tongue out like he just played a prank on something.
Yeah.
And then any interaction that he has with a porcupine.
Fair.
I just love like Fitz's sigh, his mental sigh every time any of those things happen, and it's just great.
Yeah. No, Night Eyes is such a ham. I love him.
Yeah. He's just a good boy.
He is a good pup.
So thank you, JP.
Thanks, JP.
We have a question from Kristen as well. And basically what Kristen's message is that reading this series on your own is quite a different experience sometimes, because Fitz is an unreliable narrator, but Kristen says, like, I'm probably an unreliable interpreter.
Yeah, same.
So like you really read into things that like resonate with you. So listening along with a podcast like this with other perspectives is really cool and kind of reframes certain things, which is a cool thing to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, it's always good to talk with others. I really enjoy when like book clubs, I guess, and getting to talk to people. That's probably my favorite part of getting a literature degree in undergrad, was having basically book club every class, because we would have to read a book and then we would just discuss it in depth. And it was really fun to see.
Oh, have to read a book, huh?
Okay.
How much Spark Notes did you?
Yeah. Okay. So just between the 1,000 of us and I, hopefully none of my professors are listening. I did not read a ton of those books I was meant to read. Ask any literature major, they definitely didn't read all of them. I didn't read most of them probably, but
you're very vocal in class though.
I was very vocal in class. I always have opinions, which probably surprised no one. But I always found it really interesting to see the different aspects of what people grasp onto, and
what themes they pick out.
Yeah, and just how much like it really feels like part of your own identity. I feel like every book you read becomes part of your identity in some way, which is for better or worse, but some books are not very good. But I think that it's really cool and it can help shape your person. And so it's just like really fun meeting people and talking about books for that reason. You're kind of getting a glimpse into who they are.
Yeah, even this podcast, we've been doing this together for 5 years, discussing these chapters, and we're still like, oh, I did not read it that way.
Yeah. I'm first to admit I probably read things not the same way as Luke. So I won't say wrong, because there is no wrong way to read.
There's no wrong way.
But sometimes I do read it wrong. So
yes. Sometimes we both like would either skip a word or something that kind of changes the context of the passage.
Yeah. So
thank you very much, Kristen. And then, okay, I'm going to butcher this name here. Is it Ale or Ale? Ooh, I don't know. But there's a couple questions from them. And the first one, which I think is more directly related to the books, is which character from the whole series do you identify with and why? So I think we've had this discussion about the trilogies. Like at the end of the first trilogy, we talked about our favorite characters there. And I think at the starting Liveship, we talked about it as well, or maybe at the end of some of the books.
Yeah.
So out of the whole series, who do you identify with?
I think probably, I feel like I'm very similar to Althea in a lot of ways, even the negative parts. I see myself a lot. which is probably why even the first time I read it, I liked her the most. But I do feel like I have stubbornness, and sometimes I, from lack of experience, think I can do something and then I'm hit with reality and have to learn. But I am able to learn.
Right.
I think Althea is. Yeah, I think probably Althea. I'm sure there are other characters that also little bits and pieces. Also, probably, this is tooting my own horn, but I feel like Patience in a lot of ways as well. If only because I'm also scatterbrained and love picking up a new hobby and then setting it down. So
I feel like given enough time and one space, our apartment would also look like Patience's rooms.
Oh, it absolutely will in the future. Yes.
Yeah. For me, I kind of bounce between a few depending on what kind of aspects I'm looking at, but I think a little bit of Verity, a little bit of Byrrhic, not a ton, but a little bit there. But mostly, I think I've settled on Riddle.
Interesting.
More of just kind of like, I'll do the job, I'll tag along, you know. I really kind of admire Riddle's his discretion, his loyalty, and his ability to like take the part of the people that he loves. I don't know. Maybe it's more of a I admire it than it's like me, but I like Riddle quite a bit. We'll see him in the next trilogy as well.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Although I haven't read the next trilogy in a while, so maybe I'll read a passage and be like, oh, I regret saying that. But we'll see. The second question there was, if you had to get a Realm of the Elderlings tattoo, what and where would you get it? Emma, do you want to take this one?
I can start. I actually already have 2 Realm of the Elderling tattoos. I am currently working on a leg sleeve. And I have a serpent and I have Beloved.
In the
form of the Fool, like the tarot card.
Yeah.
But Ratsy is tattooed on my leg, so I guess technically 3 characters.
Yes, right. Super important character there.
Yeah, so I've been trying to, as we go through the series, add 1 major character for each trilogy that we read. So my next major character is Night Eyes. I'm getting a wolf tattooed next, but I will have to post a picture because I think I've talked about it before and somebody has asked before for us to post it. So with this episode, I'll try to post it. Not to brag about my own tattoos. Please forward your own in.
When did you get your first one? The Fool?
3 years ago.
3? 4? Something like that. Yeah.
3.5. Yeah, it was like right at the end of we hadn't finished the last of the first trilogy, book of the first
Assassin's
trilogy,
Quest.
but we were almost there.
Okay, yeah.
So, and then
1 per trilogy. So next one's coming up.
It is. I know.
Gotta start planning.
Yeah, so I will do that, and then once I have all the trilogy major people that I have planned, so basically I'm doing Night Eyes next, then after that a dragon, and then after that Fitz, and then I'm gonna like fill in with little things from the books. I don't know. But yeah, so that's mostly me.
For
Luke,
me,
what about you?
I don't have any tattoos right now because I want one, but I have major tattoo indecision. And I feel like as soon as I get one, I'm going to want a bunch of stupid ones. So I want to like have one that I really want first. So for the first one, I have no idea what I would get for Realm of the Otherlings, really. Man, I really don't know. Don't have good ideas on it. Maybe just like a fox head pendant or something, or pin for the Ketrigan, the Queen's Guard. But that could also double for like the fox head pendant for Wheel of Time. So it could be like a double meaning kind of thing. I don't know. It's hard to pick.
It is.
I like the idea of getting text, but also I don't think I like the way text looks as a tattoo on somebody most of the time. Sometimes I've seen it, it's really cool. But like I don't know if I want to get a block of like a block quote somewhere, you know?
Not the entire B movie on your back?
No, that's already there actually.
No, my next actually my answer should have been dragons on my back, like Beloved's dragons. Yeah.
Rest in peace, those dragons in the next book. Too.
Yeah. Also not great. It would not be. Yeah. Throw back to that one time that we found the cover of. There was like a cover of that, whatever book that is. It's the.
Yeah, was it Golden Fool or something?
I think so. There's like an older cover with the art of Beloved with his shirt. It's on from the back, and you see their back tattoo, and it looks eerily similar to what's that actor's name? Ben.
No, Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck. It looks like Ben Affleck's tattoo a little bit.
I remember that. That was pretty funny. Remember that when that meme was making the rounds?
The
picture of him.
Yeah, I feel bad for him. If only because he couldn't own up that he liked it. He got it and liked it.
We have some questions and some comments from Jess, and these are a little bit more about fandoms as a whole. So Jess is kind of talking about how I think they were listening to another podcast that kind of talked about fandoms and how those come about. And it's mainly because of the negative space that authors create. So like they create something, they lay out a world, and in the places where they don't fill in, that leaves space for fans to fill in their own blanks, to speculate on things, to theorize about things. So Jess was kind of asking if that's what we think elevates Realm of the Elderlings, to go from just enjoyed to need to be discussed.
Yeah, I definitely think it helps. It wouldn't probably be very fun to discuss week to week every chapter if everything was laid out.
Right, yeah.
And as much as I get frustrated because there are no rules and set out for us and we don't know how a lot of things work.
Not all the mysteries are talked about.
Yeah, it still wouldn't. I feel like it does make it enjoyable. It really scratches the brain.
Like, where are those ancient forest men in the Six Duchies with the black teeth?
Yes.
You know?
That do the man. And what about the man ritual that is never discussed again? And I don't know.
Jess also talks about how unreliable narrators kind of fill that same void for them. So it just kind of is the same way of like, oh, are they actually telling the truth here? What are they actually feeling and what are they doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of speculation like that is really fun in this. And I think that's a hallmark of a lot of the really great long epic series. You know, I've talked about before, but Wheel of Time has a lot of mysteries that you can theorize from book to book. There's even Harry Potter. Not everything's explained, so you can like guess around at things because the world building isn't super logical and there's a lot of plot holes, but then it leaves you room to kind of, I don't know, have a headcanon about something. There's a lot of different things like that kind of make it fun to, you know, speculate and talk with your friends about it.
Right.
That's what makes it fun. It's just like bar talk or, you know, sitting on a couch and like, what about this though?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then we have a couple questions from, one topic specifically from Audrey. And that's kind of books with similarities to Realm of the Elderlings. And CB Artnik or C. Bartnick also has a question of other books that we've enjoyed that have similarities to Hobb's work. So kind of group those two together. And I'm going to start with Audrey's comment. Extended comment was about A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. Also, if you know it, Game of Thrones is the first book in that series.
Audrey probably heard of it.
Yeah, you probably heard of it. But if they've just seen the show, you know, maybe they won't know the book series name. But Audrey kind of lays out a lot of similarities between the two works, how there's a character that has a kind of telepathic communication with a wolf. He's a bastard son. You know, there's a bunch of like things they list out there, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but they are contemporaries, they've had book blurbs. Like George R. R. Martin wrote a book blurb for some of Robin Hobb's stuff, but Assassin's Apprentice came out before Game of Thrones came out. They've just been like kind of writing in parallel. And I was wondering if you thought of any other books that had kind of similarities that you found was weird.
I don't know if weird. The problem is now that we do this podcast and I spend so much time, or so much of free time, deeply reading Robin Hobb and thinking about Realm of the Elderlings and making content with Realm of the Elderlings, my go-to is comparing everybody to the characters in Realm of the Elderlings. I feel like you can find them everywhere. We're currently watching, we just rewatched the Wheel of Time series leading up to season 3 because it's not out yet as of this recording.
Right. Yeah.
But I feel like Perrin makes me think of Fitz. He's really quiet. He has wolves that he's bonded with. He has an axe. I'm actually currently reading Wheel of Time, so I see a little bit. I don't know. I don't think they write super similarly.
Yeah, but you can kind of see
I see the character similarities.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I'm the same with you. Like, we spend so much time with these characters that you can't help but relate and like take note of some traits and kind of compare them. Because that's just that's what like character tropes are, right? In fantasy, there's certain things that you'd be like, oh, that's similar to this. But I've never really compared book structures to each other. I don't know. Yeah.
No, I have done that in the past for papers, but no, I don't naturally do that though. I don't think. I look for characters. And then like as I explained recently on a podcast.
Which episode? You don't know?
Maybe that was today.
Maybe it was today.
Sorry, we took a break.
We had some dinner.
So I don't know if that was today or not. But I talked about previously how when I read books, it's hard for me to get into a book until I care about a character.
Yep, that was this episode.
Yep, that was, cool. Losing my mind. But one thing that helps me not give up characters and is a good placeholder for me as I'm trying to get into characters is looking for characters I like from other works in the characters I'm reading until they become their own thing.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of times I'm looking for Fitz, I'm looking for Beloved, I'm looking for Althea, even Malta, Brashen, maybe not Malta, but I'm looking for characters I know and love in other books, and I always find them. So I don't know as much about structure, but
yeah, like there's not, it's really hard to compare those two because I don't think of like that, but there's like famous ones like, Lord of the Rings came out and then everyone kind of copied the quest structure, and like Sword of Shannara is a pretty blatant copy of that too, even though it turned into its own fun series. Wheel of Time, The Eye of the World, the first book, is that same structure there, but those are well known, and I've not really done that with Realm of the Elderlings.
Yeah, maybe we should try it sometime.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to think about though. And then C.B. Artnick or C. Bartnick, not sure, is other books that you've enjoyed that have similarities to Hobb's work.
Ooh, I'm really bad with book recommendations because my guilty pleasure is young adult fiction, not like fantasy.
Okay. What's your favorite young adult fiction that has the best characters that you've read that you can remember at least?
Yeah, well, my go-to is the Red Queen series. I don't know if it's as good of characters as Hobb, because Hobb is kind of top tier.
Right, it's really hard to get like an actual comparable.
Yes, but I highly recommend that series. It's by
Victoria Aveyard.
Yeah, Aveyard.
Aveyard, something
I believe.
Like that.
Yeah. I like that one a lot. I think that it has really good depictions of aftermath of war and what realistic well, I guess I've never been in war, but realistic to me depictions of how a person who is faced with the mantle of being the one and is then going through a war would react, especially when they love their family. I think a lot of times, especially young adult fiction or fiction, you see a lot of characters who are the one who love their family, but then are magically okay during battles and don't
Right.
and like they worry about their family, but they're not that worried ultimately.
So that actually has
yeah.
a lot of similarities with Fitz then.
Yeah.
Because he does go through struggles and they don't just disappear. It takes a long time to mend and
Yeah.
maybe sometimes never does.
Right. And I will say it's one of the, so I think there's 4 books to the series. The first one is a lot lighter. It gets darker. You have to stick with it if you want that, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But it is really well done. I think it's a really interesting premise. It's magic where there's not supposed to be magic. You know, the good stuff. But yeah, I don't know. That's probably one of my favorites. I also highly recommend, it's not, well, there is a series to it, but you don't have to read the series. But Goose Girl.
Oh, that's like a really old book now, isn't it?
Yeah, that makes me feel old that it's an old book. But yes, Goose Girl. Luke is Googling who it's by.
Let me look it up real quick. Well, The Goose Girl is a Brothers Grimm, but
yes, it is a retelling of the
is
Brothers
it
Grimm.
Shannon Hale?
Yes, Shannon Hale's The Goose Girl. Shannon Hale has written a lot of young adult books that are really good.
Came out in 2003.
Ugh.
Over 20 years ago.
Wow. I remember it like it was yesterday when I was reading it. It is a great series. It's a retelling of The Goose Girl, which is a fairy tale, but it's really interesting and it has a magic system where there's like innate magic in some people. Like, I don't know. And I think it's just such a cool story. It is really easy to read. You'll breeze through it if you're a reader, but it's just like a fun one. It's a little dark, we'll say. I mean, there's a theme.
Brothers Grimm fairy tale, like
yes.
sure.
Yeah.
Those are all really dark.
There is a beheaded horse at one point, which is a really sad scene.
I mean, we all grew up with the Never-Ending Story, right? Artax.
That's true.
Horses have horrible ends in old fantasy.
I know, it's so sad. But yeah, I think those 2 are pretty good for like the fantasy and characters that are kind of down on their luck and fighting against all odds, you know?
It's hard for me to recommend stuff with the same reason that you give, because it's really hard to compare Hobb's work to other people's. I've seen other people recommend authors that I haven't had a chance to read yet, so I can't quite go into all of those, but I really, really enjoy, for deep characters, I've said it before, even on 10 minutes ago, but The Wheel of Time, it's not going to be the same kind of writing. It's a lot more descriptive of the world.
Yes.
But over the 14 books, I appreciate the characters as much as I appreciate Hobb's characters. And people can bounce off it. People sometimes don't like those books, but I really do enjoy them. And then I also really, really like Susanna Clarke's Piranesi, which is kind of like an exploration of like a weird environment that the person is in with someone who doesn't really care much about the world around them, or is like curious about the world around them, but isn't concerned about like what happens, which is a very interesting kind of turn of things. And I kind of can relate Fitz to that a bit, especially in this book. He's just kind of feels like he wants to be swept up in the current.
Yeah. Wintro.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of good books that I could recommend, but nothing that kind of strikes that same chord as Robin Hobb's heavy emotional gut punch.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I get heavy emotional gut punches all the time because I'm a crier. So
yeah, I feel like if I thought a long time about it, I could probably come up with a couple. And if you have more specific asks, I can recommend some books. So I've read quite a bit, but Still working through my my to read catalog.
Yes, yeah. Aren't we all?
It's ever growing too. I don't think I ever knock off any books without adding 2 more. So, all right. And we have also a very nice message from Funder. And their question is kind of continuing on the podcast/book series recommendations, but combines the two and is asking about other book series podcasts that have analysis that we would recommend or that we listen to. Because we've talked about, at least I've talked about Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast, which is, partially inspiration too for me.
Mm-hmm.
And you've talked about Potterless a bit,
Yes.
that Harry Potter one. And we've also talked about Buckkeep Radio, the other one for Realm of the Elderlings. There's also a Return to the Realm.
Yes.
But I'm not sure if they're continuing. I think they did all of Live Ships, but I'm not sure if they've started the other series yet.
I'm not so sure either, but if they are, they're definitely worth checking out.
But do you have any other book podcasts that you listen to?
Yeah, I might have brought it up once or twice on the podcast before, but I'm obsessed with this podcast called Overdue Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reread of different books. They don't really pick a specific genre though. And it's more of a
it's a straight book club kind of podcast, right? They don't pick a series. It's just a bunch of different ones. Sometimes they read multiple in a series, but they might be split over a year or so.
Exactly. So it's more just like a one full book per episode. But yeah, I really like them. I think they have a really fun dynamic. It's like 2 childhood friends, I think. They're from like Boston or something. So they're fun. I always like listening to them.
Yeah, and I've listened to a few episodes of them, and they're really fun too. I don't specifically have a lot of series analysis podcasts to recommend because I ever since we started this, I don't really find myself wanting to listen to 1 to 2 hours to maybe 3 hours deep dive of a different series because a lot of my bandwidth is taken up with reading this series in depth. So I kind of appreciate the more book club podcasts as well. I know The Legendarium is a very popular fantasy book club podcast. They cover similar to what Overdue does, but more on just fantasy, I believe. So they will cover bigger series and things like that, but it's also, I believe, 1 book an episode. So not quite a chapter by chapter breakdown.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I don't know. There was one I used to listen to a long time ago that was going through all of the Greek mythology stories. And that was really fun, but I just didn't like it. So I never continued, and I don't even remember the name. So I won't name and shame, but
there are a ton of podcasts out there, especially like for Wheel of Time. There's probably 20 of them, and they're all very, very well done. So you just kind of have to find the series that you like and hope that there are others out there. Of course, it's a lot easier if the series is popular.
Yes. Yeah, definitely a lot more people wanting to talk about those more popular books. But yeah, no, I don't know. I guess my podcasts are usually less book oriented and more just like fun.
Yeah, comedians or,
Yeah,
You with everybody else during the pandemic, you were on a true crime kick for a little bit.
Yeah, I think I was for a really long time on a true crime. Oh my goodness, a true crime kick. And I like hearing mysteries. So then it sort of devolved into me listening to like fake ghost stories, which I guess is a type of book, but, but it was more just people like reading off listener write-ins, or some of them were more fake listener write-ins that were like just a really scary story, which I loved listening to while
basically
I worked.
Just creative writing.
Just basically like short stories. And I'm more of that. I like more entertainment than deep diving, which is funny then that I got into the deep diving end of the podcast range, but
exactly. But there's a ton of podcasts out there. You can pretty much find anything for any interest. So thank you very much for that question. All right, we have a question once again about kind of Robin Hobb's writings in general and her inspirations. This is from Vanis, and they're asking about how Robin Hobb says that she is inspired by J.R.R. Tolkien and is wondering that if we feel his influence in the books, in her writing, and if we do, like, what are those things, or if we read them completely different, or are maybe there are other series that you find more similar. So it's kind of similar
Yeah.
question to there, but
I'm going to say one thing that sticks out to me about Tolkien is the undercurrent of just, I don't know how to say this, but like respecting the environment and peace being a goal.
yeah,
I feel like that's something.
they're anti-war books.
Yeah. I feel like those things really stick out when you read the books. And it really is like, I guess, just core to what you read. Like the stories are based on those ideas to me when I
Yeah.
read them. And I don't see that messaging in Hobb. Although a little I do, I guess. I take that back because it just looks a little different. It's like a reflection in a pond rather than a mirror, I guess, where like we do see, especially with Beloved's character, I think, not so much the nature aspect, although there is, of course, people who can converse with animals. It doesn't feel as much about environment as it is more just a magic system to me. But when it comes to like peace being the answer and stuff, obviously Beloved's goal is to balance out the world. And Beloved has a lot of lines throughout every trilogy where they talk a lot about doing the right thing. I think one of my favorite quotes in this series as a whole is, "We must continue to do what's right, even if we don't believe we can succeed."
Yeah.
And I just love that. And I feel
like that's very similar themes to Lord of the Rings too. Yeah.
So it is there, but it's not in the same way. So yeah, I guess I can see. So yes, influence, I guess.
Right.
I started this with, no, I don't think so. And then went into, actually, maybe I'm wrong.
So there's a really interesting quote by Terry Pratchett, one of the great fantasy authors. And he's talked about how influential Tolkien is on the scene. And I just want to read that off really quick because I think it fits into this discussion. J.R.R. Tolkien has become a sort of mountain, appearing in all subsequent fantasy in the way that Mount Fuji appears so often in Japanese prints. Sometimes it's big and up close. Sometimes it's a shape on the horizon. Sometimes it's not there at all, which means that the artist either has made a deliberate decision against the mountain, which is interesting in itself, or is in fact standing on Mount Fuji. And I think that's really good description of what influences Robin Hobb in this, because there were a lot of other fantasy before, not a lot, but there were quite a few different things of fantasy before Tolkien wrote his series. But after Tolkien, a lot of it looked similar.
Right.
A lot of it took influence from his works when he took influence from all over the world.
Right.
So I think that kind of journey that you talked about and some like the larger themes appear there, but also kind of the homecoming aspect of it. I really see her, his influence in her writing, because that is kind of the big theme in Tolkien's work as well, is that they go on this journey, they go on this huge heroic journey, and then they come back and things have changed and they have changed. And that's kind of similar to pretty much every single story here.
Yeah.
Like Liveship, they leave town because they need to do this big journey and they come back and everything has changed and they have changed and they have different goals now. And Fitz goes on this huge thing and he comes back and then he is with Molly for a while, but his home has changed. He has changed through his journeys.
Right.
So I see kind of influences in those sorts of things, and not in the bald way that, sort of Shannara has this old wizard guy go to this farmstead and say, "Hey, you need to go on this quest to get this magic sword to kill the Dark Lord."
Right.
That's kind of a pretty strong influence of Lord of the Rings there. But
Yes.
yeah, I can see his influence in a lot of works, and this is no different, even though his characters are more about nobility and trying to kind of reach that nobility, and Robin Hobb's are more grounded,
Yeah.
I guess, a little bit. Tolkien's feel like the like what people strive for.
This is kind of a hot take, but I feel like Tolkien's version of the world is like a neurotypical viewing of the black and white of good and evil of the world, and Robin Hobb's is more like somebody with anxiety's view of the world, or like depression, or like, you know what I mean, like. And I'm not saying that Tolkien didn't suffer from any sort of whatever, but I do think that it feels more light. I mean, there is obviously depth to it's hard, there's depth, but it just on the whole feels as though, and maybe that's also because of just nostalgia and I don't know.
I would have to look at word counts, but I feel like all of Lord of the Rings trilogy is shorter than maybe the first two books of this series. So
Whoa.
they're relatively short compared to modern fantasy. So there's a lot more depth that Robin Hobb can explore.
Yeah, it just feels like
yeah,
that's
fair. He was setting out to write a mythos kind of thing, origin for England.
And I mean, hey, I think he succeeded.
Yeah, true. All right. Interesting topic there, but we'll move on a little bit to, let me see. Tumsy, does discussing the books together change the way you feel or think about a character or situation? I would say yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes. We've talked about just a few questions ago about how we read things differently still.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think talking about things, we've changed our minds on the podcast.
Definitely. I think it's good to talk it out. And here, I mean, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but sometimes I think negatively of characters. And so therefore that colors my reading, whereas Luke's a little bit more neutral most of the time. So he doesn't look as cynically at some of the interactions, which does help me to maybe reimagine.
Maybe go into between those 2 points.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know. I definitely learn a lot and change my mind all the time.
Yeah. I would say same. Yeah. It's fun to discuss it and talk with you guys too.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. From Hazel and Macy the cats, what surprised you the most about making this podcast? I would think how many people want to listen to us for an hour and a half every week.
Yeah.
That surprised me the most.
That's a pretty big surprise. I think, how thought out these series are, and how, like, even sometimes when we find mistakes, which is pretty rare.
I think they'll get more rare in the final trilogy with the family stuff. But
there's still, I feel like it's really interesting just to see the traces all the way from book one to the final book.
Yeah.
And things that reappear. I think it's really, obviously you notice them as you read, but whenever you're doing in-depth like this, I think you appreciate it more.
Especially with the way that Hobb writes, where she doesn't really plan out too much.
Yeah.
I think she's talking about her style of writing before, and I don't know too much about it, but I do know that she kind of writes them into a situation and then just thinks about what the character would do, and that's it. And that's the way that she goes. She doesn't plan out that much. Yeah. So having all that foreshadowing and those plot points kind of meet back up is the hallmark of a great series.
I agree.
Internally consistent most of the time.
Yes.
All right, so Lauren is asking about the logistics behind the podcast. She's asking if if it's difficult to make time for the podcast alongside life and the time commitment, and has that approach changed over time, and is it even a challenge?
Mm. Yes and no. I think we've gotten mostly good at sticking to
Yeah.
minimum once a week. There, we usually pick a day, and for a while, that's the one day that we record. We will do weeks where we record multiples or whatever, especially if we're trying to plan ahead for thing. We know we're gonna,
Vacations
we're
or
gonna be on vacation. We're gonna
moving
be
or
with family.
yeah.
It just gets annoying. Not annoying. That's not nice, but it gets annoying whenever there's like a
annoying.
big like life event and it's not planned for. Like
Yeah.
my grandfather passed during, I think, year 2 of us doing this, and that was really, it was hard to care about the podcast when I was
Yeah.
thinking about how I'm going to get to a funeral and do all that. But having the podcast, I think, was nice. A nice, like
It's
solid.
Yeah, it's a schedule that you need to turn your brain off of other things
Yes.
to do this thing,
Right.
because we've made a commitment.
Yes.
And that is good and bad, both, you know? Logistic sides, yeah, it is a lot of time out of the week. I do all the editing as well.
Yeah, Luke does a lot.
And I used to be slower at editing, and I used to take a lot more notes during my readings. I used to read the chapters twice, read them once, maybe highlight a couple things, and then read them again and take notes.
Right.
Now I usually read them once and highlight something, and I usually read it, maybe a day, maybe right before we record, so it's fresh in my mind. So it kind of logistically that cut down some of the time, which has been really nice. Maybe it hasn't made my ramblings as coherent, but I haven't done the taking notes since I think the first year we were doing this. That helped. But I also got better at editing, and we got better at talking as well.
Yeah.
I used to cut out a lot more ums, and I used to over edit things, and I've just learned to kind of let it breathe a bit.
Yeah, I think that's like a surprise aspect, is that we are better talkers. And I think just in general, I mean, I just finished grad school and I had to do presentations, and I hate talking in front of crowds, which is funny because I'm a big talker, but I don't like being the center of attention in a crowd. And I found that doing this made me more sure of what I was saying.
Yeah.
And my professors all commented on how they're so surprised I don't say like and as much as my classmates. That was a note I got a lot. And then also I actually got to make a audio tour of a museum for a class, and it was so easy. My friends were all talking about how hard it was to record themselves, and they cringed listening. And I was like, oh, I'm well past that.
Well, also, I edited it. So.
Well, you helped, yes.
I directed it,
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I don't know. It's just funny. It's, I guess, not really a transferable skill anywhere else, but it is nice to feel better about speaking.
Yeah. As a whole, the podcast has been good for us, but also once in a while it is a challenge. We go in phases just like everybody else in their hobbies.
Yes.
You're really into it for a while, and then it's just like, okay, I have to do this. I have to get it done.
Yeah.
And then, a couple months later, you're back to recording multiple and picking up steam. So
yeah. And I mean, it does take
depends on the books too, where we're at.
I know. Yeah. When we're at a lull in the books, it's really hard to stick on schedule, but it is, it's a fun hobby and it's fun to do. And I think, I don't know. Yeah. As we've gone on, it's been nice that we still, we haven't missed too many weeks, but it does happen. It happened more while I was in grad school, because a lot of times there's just not enough time in the day, but
we've actually done pretty good the last couple books.
Yeah.
I think earlier we missed a few more, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just about, planning. And I'm not super great at that. So
I would say For how much time it takes for a week for me, maybe an hour reading and making sure of the chapter. Probably not a full hour, but maybe an hour every week for that. 2 hours for recording. And maybe another 3 for editing, and then 1 more hour for making sure everything's good. But that hour is like downtime. So maybe 5.5 hours a week or something for this.
Yeah.
Maybe 6. I don't know.
I guess I definitely take an hour to read the chapters because I'm forcing myself to go really slow. And I also take notes.
You're a quick reader, but yeah, you're a quick
skimmer.
skim reader.
Yeah, so I have to focus really hard to not skim. So probably like an hour to read the chapter and take notes, which I do in the book. Just sacrilegious. And then let's see, it really depends on the week, but it can take me anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to make memes for the week. And
I swear you've made like 4 in like 10 minutes if you're really feeling inspired, though.
Yeah, it really depends on if I'm inspired by the image or an idea. Then I can like pump a couple out. But sometimes I just sit there and look at different things, and it's like ridiculous how long. You would think it does not take that long to make a meme, but I assure you, there are days when the inspiration runs dry. But yeah, so there's probably that. And then whenever I post on all our social medias when the episode is up, so you can blame me whenever it's not up in a timely manner. But I've cut that down from 45 minutes to probably 25 minutes.
Repetition makes you better at things.
Yes, it does. It does.
Lauren also says as a sign off that Malta is the 3rd best character behind Beloved and Patience as a hot take.
That is a real hot take, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. I like it. I like hot takes like that.
Yeah.
It's good.
I disagree, but I like it.
I think I missed a sign off by Jess as well. Appreciates how we discussed the last few chapters. When Jess wrote in, that was about the chapter. So
with Kenneth. And
kudos on that. But then also, this is why I wanted to bring it up. Saw that Robin Hobb commented on our meme.
Oh, yes. Okay, can we take a second, pause the questions to talk about every week since Robin Hobb has followed us on Instagram? I think Luke and I have the same discussion where I think about what meme to post and I go, well, we can't post that. She's going to see it. And Luke goes, she's not going to look at our memes. Robin Hobb doesn't see our memes. She doesn't look at our posts. It's fine. Just post it. We think it's funny. She's not going to see it. Every week, without fail, we have that conversation. I post the memes. Nothing happens. She doesn't even like it. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness.
I don't think she's even been on like the Viewed on our story before.
No, which is fine. And she does not have to view our content.
I did not expect that.
No. I'm so thrilled she follows us even.
I'm so thrilled she doesn't look at the story sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, there are some. Yeah. Please, Hobb, if you're listening to this, please don't look. But yeah, so recently I had posted a meme. Luckily, one of the tamer memes for her to have seen and commented on. But it was like liked Hobb villains or something.
Yeah, unhated Hobb villains or something.
Meetup. And then it goes to an empty room. Yeah. And she responded, hey.
With a bunch of exclamation points.
So I freaked out a little bit. I'm like, she hates us. She hates me.
I had to remind him. I was like, she liked the post too. It's fine.
Also, probably a joke. It's fine. It's fine. But I was very nervous that Robin Hobb hated us for a quick second. But also it's crazy to think that Robin Hobb has seen a meme I made about her book series.
Yeah.
So fun.
Kind of funny. Anyways, time back in on the questions.
Yes,
that was a fun
back into the
side.
question. Yes.
Yeah. Just have a few more here. One from Tamara. If you had to do another podcast on a different series, what would it be?
I would do a Scooby-Doo podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like all Scooby-Doo or a certain run of it?
Probably. Ooh, that's hard to choose. I just love Scooby-Doo.
True.
So probably like all Scooby-Doo.
Guys, everyone listening. Emma likes Scrappy-Doo.
Scrappy-Doo is great. I think He's underrated. He's hated too much.
Maybe it would be a fun podcast for you to do.
I know. It'll be like pro Scrappy propaganda. Like,
yeah. Anyway, what would really have boosted this episode?
Just a little Scrappy Doo.
Scrappy Doo and the weird uncle one that comes in.
Scooby Dum.
Scooby Dum. There you go.
I'm a real stan, guys.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do another book series as in depth as this.
Mm-mm.
It'd be a tough one to do, but I think because there's so many the book series that I like, there are so many people who already do podcasts on them.
Yeah.
So maybe something like, maybe like the Saga of Recluse or something. But it would be a boring podcast because that's like that's my comfort fantasy. Like it's epic fantasy. They have like good and evil, but it's like it's good and evil, you know?
Yeah.
And they're very similar. They're formulaic. I like them. I don't know. They're just fun to read. But they're not super interesting. There's not a lot of negative space in them.
Makes them less good.
Just makes them different, you know? Or maybe I would pick some like movies or something or TV series, but nothing is calling out to me.
Fair.
I got my hands tied with this series for another 12 years. So
another 40 years, you know.
Yep. And then Tamara also had, if you could take a character from an outside series and put them anywhere into the realm of the Elderlings, anywhere in the timeline, who would you bring in and where would you put them?
Listen, I'm just saying Scrappy Doo. No, I'm just kidding. Only teasing. I feel like so I'm currently reading Wheel of Time for the first time. I'm about to finish the first book. I kind of feel like
recency bias is strong too.
Yeah. But I think like Moraine and Lan, because they have to go together. Warder can't leave their Aes Sedai. I think I would put them in to the world. I don't know. I don't know where. Maybe the next trilogy, because I don't want Bjork to die. And I want them to get
that's fair.
The dragon out a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And I feel like Moraine could just fire magic.
True.
Ice fire out.
You don't need to do the big explosion kind of thing.
No, nobody needs to suffer.
Yeah.
Also, she could like help out with Pale Woman and all of the like horribleness that she's doing in the other island. No, not other island. Oh my gosh.
As Levjal,
yes.
Yeah.
I feel like that could be a help to our characters.
Yeah.
But also I don't think Moraine would really care. Unfortunately. Although she'd hear about a big wheel from Beloved and she'd be like, I'm in. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
Wheel? You're trying to put the wheel in a different track? It's about fate and time? Let's do it.
I'm on it. I'm on
it. Pete's Dragon would be fun. Just throw Pete's Dragon at
yes. Okay. Valid.
At Tintaglia and she wouldn't know what to make of him. Character from another series. I want Bartimaeus from the Bartimaeus trilogy. It is a young adult series. He's a very sardonic and quippy like djinn, and the books are from his perspective, and he has a bunch of footnotes about his own references, and he like references his own heroics, and he puts a little footnote of like, I did this, you know?
That's funny.
And it's very funny. I want to have him narrating like what's going on because I need to bring some levity to these books.
Fair.
Honestly, through the whole thing, because he doesn't age. So just have him hanging on a shoulder somewhere.
Yeah. I feel like I'm sure I've read books where there's somebody who's good at politicking that could take on Regal That would be good.
Oh, throwing in like Littlefinger into the court.
Listen, Littlefinger
Bucky.
would thrive. Littlefinger
True.
would walk away as king of the Six Duchies.
Yeah, because no one's really good at politics there, but like put him in. Put him in, coach.
I don't know. Well, also I feel like Littlefinger would love Jade.
Yeah, true. Like
Or
when No
would
Shade
hate.
was alive.
Wouldn't he? He wouldn't have his little
Ooh,
helpers.
Maybe.
Um,
Think Snape would get along with Galen.
ugh, probably. I don't know. I want somebody to solve Fitz's bad areas.
I want
or
a
something.
friend for Fitz.
Yes. Randall Thor.
No. I think more like Matt would be a good friend for him. Loosen him up a little and bring him to the tavern.
I guess Fitz is like, yeah, he wants to be loose. He wants to let loose. Perrin would be too similar.
Way too similar. They just brood forever.
They would just like look at each other and chill. They'd love to talk about dogs though.
True.
They'd be like, oh, what's your wolf's name?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Fun to think about,
Yes.
but yeah.
No, I can't really, I don't know.
If we put like some kind of research character with Alice in the Rainwild Chronicles in Kelsingra at the end, be interesting too. Maybe Indiana Jones. Just throw not really.
Geralt of Rivera.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, The Witcher.
What
What
would he slay though? The others? Just let him loose on other island?
Okay, sure, but no, I think he could. Well, okay, fair. He does
Geralt.
like need to kill things, right?
He doesn't need to.
Okay,
but
so then why can't he protect the people of the duchies?
there you go. And then we had a question from Ashlyd. Is how we found each other and came up with the idea to start the podcast. So we just covered how we started the podcast and the idea to start the podcast recently. I think it was probably 4 or 5 episodes back.
Yeah.
Now, but how we met each other? Well, we were dating before we started the podcast.
Yes.
And we met each other through our retail job.
Yes.
We were working at Gap. At
The
Gap. Folding denim. Folding the jeans.
Always got to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both wore a crazy amount of denim.
Everything was branded Gap.
It was.
Everything.
Well, listen, whenever you work at the Gap, or at least 9 years ago, when we worked at the Gap, you got 50% off Gap.
True.
So
True. Like my whole wardrobe was Gap clothes.
And yeah, why wouldn't you buy from the Gap if you get 50% off? Also, we got 50% off of Old Navy and Banana Republic and Athleta.
Yep.
Because those are all sister companies, although Old Navy is no longer a sister company. I know too much lore about the company we used to work for. We have not worked there in 7 years.
Something like that.
7.5.
It's been a while.
Long time.
Yeah. So, yeah, we met each other long before we started the podcast.
Yes.
Long
I used
before.
to tell Luke all about my terrible Tinder dates, and he would laugh at me. So
it was a good basis for a relationship.
yes, we're good friends.
And then finally, we have Katrina asks, is Fitz happy? And we're happy, but Fitz definitely is not.
I mean, look, I think Fitz is content at the moment. And where we're at in the story.
I feel Fitz is content because he doesn't have any emotions to be not content.
Fair.
But at the same time, he's discontent with his life because he doesn't know what to do and he is the skill yearning, you know?
He's having the whole quarter life crisis, you know?
True.
He hit 25 and there's no such thing as college, so he can't get his master's degree.
He's an old man.
He can't.
30-year-old.
They don't have marathons, so he can't do that. He could make sourdough though. Maybe he got really into sourdough making.
Need another blood plague in there so he can just lock up in his house and make sourdough.
Hey, what's up, you guys?
It's Fitz Chivalry here.
Coming to you live in the skill.
It's Mishap here with my dad. Yeah. We're making sourdough today.
true. You know what? Hap is for sure a TikTok guy.
He's an iPad kid.
He has a TikTok account, and he is getting Fitz in the background, and Fitz is just always grumpy.
Yep.
So...
Yep. Thank you so much, everyone who asks questions and writes in all the time. And maybe this is your first time writing in. We really appreciate hearing from you.
Yeah, we always like hearing what you want to know and what you want to talk about and what your opinions are on all this stuff. And can't believe you've been with us for 5 years.
Yeah.
And even if you haven't, welcome.
Yes.
We'll be here for another 10 at least.
Yeah,
so.
Right. We're going to do all the books. And hopefully we're going to do all the short stories too, eventually.
Yeah.
Kind of slot them in where we can. So thank you everyone again who wrote in. If you liked this kind of more rambly Q&A session, let us know. Maybe we can do more in the future.
Yeah. Or if you just liked having the not normal chapter by chapter, having a short story, we'd love to know.
True. Although since it was basically the length of a short story, I felt, or a length of a chapter, I felt like it was just a normal episode.
True.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
See you next week.